starting with prayer, and I'm reading again from the same book. It's a book of prayers for every day of the year. I really like this one common prayer. It's called. It says, "Today we remember the special role that Mary plays in the redemption of the world, and to celebrate the example she is to each of us as disciples of Jesus. When the angel Gabriel visited Mary, she was a teenager and occupied Palestine as anonymous and insignificant as the billions of people who live and die today in the slums of megacities. But the angel of the Lord called Mary by name and proclaimed that she would carry inside her womb God in flesh. It is a miracle we remember even as we put into practice, however humble our circumstances, God proposes to live in and through our bodies. As a sign to remind us that anything is possible with our God, we remember that Mary conceived Jesus without the help of anyone. O Lord, let my soul rise up to meet you as the day rises to meet the sun. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. Amen. Come, let us sing to the Lord. Let us shout for joy to the rock of our salvation. Here am I, the servant of the Lord. Let it be to me according to your will. Psalm 119, 141 to 44 says, I am small and of little account, and yet I do not forget your commandments. Your justice is an everlasting justice, and your law is the truth. Trouble and distress have come upon me, yet your commandments are my delight. The righteousness of your decrees is everlasting. Grant me understanding that I may live. Here am I, the servant of the Lord. Let it be to me according to your will. Our Father, thank you, Lord, for Mary's witness to joyful obedience, courageous faith, and the merciful truth that you dwell among those the world would forget. Amen. All right. So, a couple things that I want to do today. I want to have a little bit of reporting and give us a chance to talk about some of the things we wrote down or maybe prayed about over the week. I want to introduce today the concept of order and chaos in the Bible and what that means for the appearance of God. I want to talk about the witness of heaven and earth. And then there was a short reading for today called When God Was a Bird. And I thought we could spend a little bit of time talking about that today. The two objectives, the things that I want you to get from our time this morning are these. One, identify some ways that nature manifests God's presence in Scripture. Can we identify some of the ways that God seems to show up in nature according to Scripture in the Bible? And then, secondly, can we consider together how we might pursue God's presence in nature? Is it possible for us? How do we look for God? How do we find God today in nature? And so all the time when we study scripture, we're thinking about how do we understand what the Bible would have meant in that day and in those times, maybe thousands of years ago, on the one hand. And then secondly, we're also trying to understand how does this apply to the life of faith today? And so those are really the two things that I want to try to work on today. All right. I apologize if my texts are coming up on the screen. I'm not sure how to turn that off. Okay. Anyway, let's see. Let's talk about order and chaos. Well, no. First of all, let's talk about the assignments that we worked on last time. I was able to read a couple of the welcome, uh, Agnelli's welcome. I was able to read a couple of the assignments. Thank you for those of you who shared those with me. Let's see. I think what I'd like to do is to get into groups. Would that work all right? Groups of maybe two or three to talk about some of the things that you wrote down for last time. Gosh, would that be all right to get into groups of two or three to talk about some of the things we wrote down from last week over the week? We try that? Okay, let's see. Okay, hello everyone. We have a nice conversation. Yeah, wonderful. Would anyone like to share it with the rest of us, something that was powerful or meaningful? Go ahead, please. Belinda.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, my partners in this were Jose Morales, Cindy, and Chuy. He came towards the end. But Jose shared with us that he tried to practice the contemplative prayer,
Mhm.
and he tried to have no distractions. And what was good was that he went on vacation and that he enjoyed the ocean and made him think of how God's creation is beautiful, and it reminded him of the Book of Genesis, um, and how he enjoyed the beauty, where he was at, and that's what it reminded him of during his contemplative prayer. And Cindy shared that God is great. That I think about a week ago or a couple of weeks ago, she said that they had a a windy storm and things were flying around and everything was being swept away. And then all of a sudden, she noticed that from 1 minute, it just changed. The sun came out and there was silence, like nothing had happened. And that was one thing that she wanted to share. And what I shared with them was that I try to practice contemplative prayer in my every day, first thing in the morning, when I pray the rosary, and not just to pray the rosary, but to meditate. Just okay, this is going to be my time with God, with Mother Mary, and it's for her. And I ask her to be with me, and I offer it, for different petitions or necessities or the world or the war, someone in need, and that helps me, you know, really get into it and contemplate every word, and not just to say the rosary or the words, but really to emphasize the words in my prayers. So that was it.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
Next.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else?
Maybe I can share what I heard from Caesar, because I know several of you in the group have teenagers, and so Caesar was sharing that children went into a retreat, and when he went to the school to receive the group, they were allowed to share through a letter their experience, and he heard how much he is loved, or how much his children love their parents, and that felt like happiness. And I teenagers yet, but I anticipate that teenagers don't speak about their emotions and their religious experiences that often. At least that has been my experience as a youth minister, and especially towards their parents. And so, a lot of times, being immigrants with different jobs, complicated work schedules, we don't get to spend a lot of time with our children. And so, when we speak about religious experience, that is powerful, just to see how they're growing in their faith and how they have their own experiences of God, and they're able to articulate that in simple words like "I love you" or "Thank you." So that was meaningful. Thanks for sharing that, Cesar.
Good. Okay. Would anyone else like to share? Okay. We can move on for now if that's all right with you. Does that sound okay? Is that all right? Thank you very much. That was a blessing to get to hear all of those accounts. Thank you. All right. I'm going to share screen again. All right. I want to talk about this idea of um, order and chaos. So here we are. This is point number 3 already on our agenda, talking about order and chaos. We'll get into this a little bit, and then we'll take a break. Um, I want to make a claim. I want to point out that in the ancient world, gods or deities, by definition, bring order to chaos. That's what it means to be a deity in antiquity. In the world of the Bible, gods are responsible for bringing order into chaos, for for maintaining the proper function of the world, of the cosmos, of governments, of agriculture, of um, the health of the people. Everything is about organizing the disordered and chaotic world and putting it into order. And so there are a number of ways you can think about that. And creation, Genesis chapter 1, probably won't turn there right now, but in Genesis chapter 1, God brings light into the world, and that's the very first thing that happens. And he separates the light from the darkness, and he calls the light day and the darkness night, and he creates um, all kinds of animals that are given their proper places in creation. And so there are animals that live in the waters, and there are animals that fly in the air, and there are animals that creep along the ground. Everything has its place and its purpose in creation. You see the undoing of creation in the flood account in Genesis chapter 6 and 7 and 8. There you have God is pressing the reset button, and so all of the created order is undone and turns back into chaos again. Water in particular seems to play a really central role in in this idea of chaos and order. I don't know if any of you have spent very much time around powerful oceans before or not. I don't know. Um, the land of Israel was right on the edge on the coast of the Mediterranean, and people all the time were traveling by ocean. They were on ships. They were moving from place to place by boat, and also trying to make a living by way of fishing. And we read about that in the Gospels and the Sea of Galilee. Also, Jesus and the disciples, multiple points are on the water. So water in antiquity is a symbol itself of death and chaos. And so it says in Genesis chapter 1 that there is, maybe I'll see if I can pull this up really quickly here. Um, It says in Genesis chapter 1, the earth was formless and empty, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. In my English translation. So these waters represent um, creation before it is brought into order, before God brings order to this chaos. These waters represent chaos. And if you ever have had a chance to be out on the water, especially if it's a windy day or a stormy day, it can be pretty unsettling if the waves are really high and the boat is rocking back and forth. Even today, that it can be a nerve-wracking and disorienting experience. Have you ever been seasick? Anyone? Have you ever been? Do you know what that feels like to be seasick? It's bad. You have to go You got to go down under the if you can, under the level of the deck, to try to get some calm. Water itself sort of doesn't have, as it says in Genesis, it doesn't have a form. It You can't contain it, and you can't hold water in your hands. It finds a way to slip out of your fingers. It resists any kind of shape. So water is a symbol of chaos in the Bible, and we see that in a lot of places. In the Red Sea, the crossing of the sea, when the Israelites are fleeing from Egypt, and if you know the story of the Exodus, the Israelites come to the Red Sea, and then Moses has to hold up his arms like this, and the waters part, and the people are able to go through the waters. And that's another sign of God bringing order to the chaotic waters there, providing a dry ground for the Israelites to cross through before the waters close up upon the pursuers of the Israelites. So water represents death and chaos in the Bible in multiple places. The plagues, certainly in the story of the Exodus, are another good example of chaos that God allows to happen to the Egyptians, and only God is able to start the plagues, but then also to stop the plagues, because God is the only true God who's able to do that. So that's a theme in Scripture that we see again and again. I want to show you this one psalm in particular. This is another account of creation that's a little bit more obscure than Genesis is, and that's Psalm 104. And this one is describing creation. Would someone be willing to read a little bit of this, either in English or in Spanish? This is I have in my program a Spanish translation. It's kind of old. I hope it still makes some sense. Would someone be willing to read some of these lines, either in English or in Spanish? Would you prefer that I read? I don't mind.
104. I can read it if you want.
Thank you, Jose. If you don't mind.
Okay. The Lord wrapped himself in light as in a garment. He stretches out the heavens like a tent and lays the beams of his upper chambers on their waters. He makes the clouds his chariot and rides in the winds of the wind. He makes winds his messengers, flames of fire his servants. He sent the earth of its foundations. It can be never moved. He covered it with the deep as with a garment. The waters stood above the mountains, but at your rebuke the waters fled. At the sound of the thunder they took the flight. They floated over the mountains, they went down into the valleys. To the place you assigned for them. You set a boundary they cannot cross. Never again they will cover the earth. He makes springs pour water into ravines. He flows between the mountains. They gave him water of the old beasts of the field. The wild donkeys quench their thirst. The birds of the skies nest by the waters. They sing among the branches. He waters the mountains from his upper chambers. The land is satisfied by the fruit of his work. He makes grass grow and the cattle. He plants for people to cultivate, bringing forth food for the earth, wine that gladdens human hearts, oil to make their faces shine, and bread that sustains their hearts. The trees of the Lord are well watered. The cedars of the Lebanon that he planted, there the birds make their nets. The stork has its home in the junipers. The high mountains belong to the wild goats. The crags are refuge for the hyrax.
Mhm. Beautiful. That's wonderful. Thank you, Jose. And it goes on for a while. It talks about all these different aspects of creation. Thank you, Jose. It talks about all these different aspects of creation and how God has created all of these different parts of the cosmos. But what I want you to see about this psalm, what I think is so fascinating and important about this psalm, is that every single part of creation has a purpose and a function. Okay? Everything that God creates for the benefit of his creatures. Okay? So he made the moon to mark the seasons. The sun knows when to go down. He brings darkness, it becomes night. All the beasts of the forest can prowl. The lions roar for their prey. They seek food from God. Um, Up here at sea, it says, the trees of the Lord are well watered, the cedars of Lebanon that he planted. The birds can make their nests in the trees. The high mountains belong to the wild goats. The crags are a refuge for the hyrax. Every single part of creation has a purpose and a function, and God has created it for someone or for something in creation. He makes grass grow for the cattle and allows plants for people to cultivate and gives us wine and oil, bread to sustain us, all these things. Um, he gives water to the beasts of the field, and the wild donkeys are able to quench their thirst. So all of these different parts of creation have some kind of a function or a purpose. You see that in Psalm 104. And I think that this psalm beautifully illustrates the idea that God brings order to chaos, that he organizes the cosmos for his good purpose and for the function of of allowing every creature to thrive. Okay, so let me see. Let's see. This is, I guess I didn't write it down when I was working on this PowerPoint presentation. I wanted to introduce the idea of ontology. This is sort of a fancy philosophical word. Ontology. In English, it's ONTOLOGY. Ontology. I'm going to stop sharing here. Ontology, ONTOLOGY, ontology is a branch of metaphysics in philosophy. Now, I'm not really a philosopher in particular, but I know that this branch, this word ontology, is concerned in philosophy, is concerned with the idea of being. In other words, um, what does it mean to exist? What does it mean to be? Is the question of ontology. All right. What does it mean to have ontological status? It's a philosophical idea. It's a branch of metaphysics. Okay. And one scholar has pointed out that today, modern people think about the question of existence in different categories compared to how they might have thought about what it means to exist back in Bible days. All right, you with me? So today, when I say, what does it mean to exist? You would say, well, something exists when it has mass, when it takes up space. If I can knock this pencil against my hand, I know that the pencil is there because it takes up space, it weighs something, and it has a color, it's blue, right? That's what it means to exist. It's there. Would you agree with that? Does that make sense? Okay. So in antiquity, this one scholar says, his last name is Walton. In antiquity, he says people thought about existence not in terms of material mass or as matter, but they thought about existence in terms of function. Okay, so is it a pencil? Well, it looks like a pencil. It's blue. It weighs something. I can feel it. It knocks against my fingers. But in antiquity, the argument is they wouldn't call it a pencil until it can be used to write. Now it's a pencil. Once you are writing with it and can use it to write, now it's a pencil. You understand? It has a function. So there's a difference between material existence and functional existence. All right. You might think about a building. Here, I'm on the campus. I'm in my office here at Marian University, and you might say, well, over the summertime, we don't have classes at Marian. That we have some, but not that many classes. Let's just say we don't have any classes going on today. There aren't very many classes going on besides what we're doing right now. Okay, it's quiet on campus, and you would say, is it a university? Well, nobody's learning anything. So is it really a university if no one's learning anything? If you have a restaurant and the restaurant is closed and nobody is eating any food, no one is cooking any food in the restaurant, is it a restaurant? Yes or no? You understand what I'm saying? Okay. The building is there. Maybe there's a kitchen. Maybe there's food in the refrigerator. Maybe it has potential to be a restaurant, but it's not a restaurant unless it's serving food. You understand? Now it's a restaurant. When people are coming and eating and paying, now you have a restaurant. You have a university when people are coming and learning and studying and coming to class. Now there's a function. So all that to say, in antiquity, it's the job of a deity. That's what a god is. A god is someone who brings order to chaos, is someone who assigns function and purpose to creation. You understand that? Are you with me there? Okay. Okay. Um, let me show you one example of this, and then we'll take a break. We'll take a break. Okay. In Psalm 82, I have another psalm for you. Oops. I'm sorry. Am I sharing screen right now? I don't think I am. Let me try to do that. Okay. Let me share one more time. Do you know this psalm, Psalm 82? Have you seen this one before? Would someone else like to read it? Would you prefer that I read? I'm happy to read it if you'd like. I can really only read it in English, is my weakness. Psalm 82 says in English, I'm going to pull up a different translation here. Let me see. God takes a stand in the divine council. God gives judgment in the midst of the gods. All right. How long will you judge unjustly and favor the cause of the wicked? Defend the lowly and the fatherless. Render justice to the afflicted and needy. Rescue the lowly and the poor. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. All right, so God is presiding over a council of other deities in Psalm 82. That's what's happening in Psalm 82. All right, and God is passing judgment on the other gods because they're not judging justly. They're not bringing order to the chaos of the world. in verse 5, it says, "These deities, these gods, neither know nor understand. They wander about in darkness, and all the world's foundations shake." Verse 6 says, "I declare, gods though you be, offspring of the Most High, all of you, and yet like any mortal you shall die. Like any prince you shall fall. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for yours are all the nations." So that's the end of the psalm. It's kind of a strange psalm for us today because we don't think about there being other gods, right? That's in Christian doctrine, we recognize the existence of one God alone, a triune God, the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. But here in antiquity, here in this biblical passage, God is presiding over this divine council and he's passing judgment on other deities. I think what this psalm is doing is, I think it's explaining in a way why Israel only pays attention to one God. Why does Israel only worship one God when all the other nations around um, also have multiple gods, multiple deities? And so Psalm 82 is Israel's God passing judgment on these other deities and explaining that they aren't doing the work that a deity is supposed to do. A deity is supposed to bring order to chaos. A deity is supposed to govern the world with justice and to act rightly, to defend the lowly and the fatherless, to rescue the lowly and the poor, deliver them from the wicked. Um, and because these other deities don't have understanding, because they wander about in darkness and not in light, as a consequence, all of the world's foundations shake. That is to say, all of the cosmos, nature is unraveled, is unsettled, is not in order. It remains in chaos. Does that make sense? You understand? Yeah. Okay. How do you like this psalm? Do you have any thoughts about this psalm or observations or questions or comments? Have you seen this psalm before? Anybody know about this psalm before? Are you surprised that there's a psalm in the Bible talking about God presiding over a divine council and passing judgment? Yeah, go ahead, Belinda.
I do. I've never seen this psalm before,
Uh-huh.
but it's just it just came, to mind that my understanding is that when before other prayers, uh, they used to learn all 150 psalms, and that was their prayer, right? Am I correct? And it just how going back to the scriptures, back then, um, how it's just a little how would how would I'm thinking how would they feel when they got to this psalm where, like you said, it was only one God and that was it. So when they got to this psalm, what were they thinking? Were they confused? Because I'm confused, coming across this psalm.
Mhm.
But like you said, back then it was just this, you know,
Thank
that
you. Thank you.
so it's I don't know.
Thank you, Belinda. So when you say what did they think? Are you
Yes,
when you say the they, are you talking about the original people who read this or who heard
yes,
this psalm or
yes,
something like that?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. So it's a good question. I think actually there are a number of places in the Old Testament in particular that refer to other deities. This is not the only place in the Old Testament that knows about other gods, that talks about other gods.
Hmm.
So if you look at the prologue to the book of Job, for example, there, I'll just pull it open really fast. Here it says, "One day the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and the Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, "Where have you been?" So these other, when it says sons of God, it's really talking about the B'nai Elohim, the sons of God. These are other divine beings, essentially.
Mm.
Is what it says in Job 1, chapter 6. Another passage that comes to mind is Genesis chapter 6.
Mm-hmm.
It says, when human beings began to grow numerous on earth, daughters were born to them. The sons of God saw how beautiful the daughters of human beings were, and they took for their wives whomever they pleased. The Lord said, my spirit shall remain in human beings forever, etc. And then it goes on, the Nephilim appeared in those days after the sons of God had intercourse with the daughters of human beings who bore them sons. They were heroes of old, men of renown. So there's tradition, there's legend about divine counsel or these other divine beings, these sons of God show up in the Old Testament in various places.
Mm-hmm.
Why? And you say you're confused about this, Belinda. I understand that and appreciate that. I think the reason why they are there in the Old Testament is to help ancient Israelites, the they that you're describing. I think it's to help them to process and to understand that there is only one God.
Okay.
So in the ancient world, everyone believed it. Everyone knew that there are multiple deities. Everyone believed that. Everyone understood that in antiquity, that there exist multiple gods
Mm-hmm.
and a pantheon. And so you have that in Babylonian religion. You have that in Greek religion. The Romans understood that there's a pantheon. There are multiple deities. And so the Old Testament makes reference to these deities. And I think Psalm 82 is doing the work of explaining the downfall of these unjust gods. Why do we only worship one God?
Mm-hmm.
Because these other gods aren't up to the job. They don't know how to bring order to chaos.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know how to govern the cosmos. They don't know how to do justice. They don't know how to defend the lowly and the fatherless. They don't know how to render justice to the afflicted. They don't know how to rescue the lowly and the poor. These other gods, they don't understand. They walk in darkness. And God passes sentence on them in Psalm 82 and says, like any mortal, you shall die. And so these other deities in Psalm 82 cease to exist. So I think it's a literary, theological explanation of why Israel worships one God. Why is there only one God in our faith? Because the other ones are insufficient, and they're not able to do what it is that a God is supposed to do, which is to bring order to chaos. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Do,
Perfect.
do you buy that? What do you think about that?
I do. It's just, that just came to mind that, once they got to, that song, what,
Yeah, for these ancient readers in the first place.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if they're in another book saying that, there's only one God, I guess they just had to add this psalm in there.
Yes. So let's see, for example, in Isaiah, since we're on the topic here, let me see if maybe it's 44.
Mm.
In Isaiah 44 in particular, in this section of Isaiah, um, here the prophet is really challenging the idea that there are other deities at all in the world. There's only one God, and that's the claim that Isaiah is making here in Isaiah chapter 44.
Mhm.
Um, uh, Here the prophet is making light of the guild of the people who professionally make idols, the idol maker. He's pointing his finger at them, and he's saying, who would fashion a god or cast an idol that is of no use? um, the ironsmith fashions a likeness, he works it over the coals, shaping it with hammers. With hunger, his strength wanes. Without water, he grows faint. The woodworker stretches a line, makes it in the copy of a man, a human display. He says, the idol maker, he picks out for himself trees of the forest. He plants a tree, and the rain makes it grow. He uses it for, he says he uses some of the same wood for fuel to warm himself. And then out of the same log, he fashions an idol and bows down and worships the idol. And he's saying that's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. Half of it he burns in the fire. He eats and the roast and is full. He warms himself and says, "Look, I am warm." The rest of it he makes into a god, an image to worship and adore. It says, "They do not know, they do not understand. Their eyes are too clouded to see, their minds perceive." So you see in Isaiah, you saw also in Psalm 82 that these other deities don't have knowledge. They don't have understanding. They don't have the ability to govern or to bring order to chaos. And so they're not true gods at all. And that's what the prophet is saying here. But that's an idea that is commonplace in antiquity, the idea that there are multiple deities. It's a concept that the biblical authors are working to correct and change in these various ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Would you like to have a minute to go to the bathroom, check your phones, get something to eat? Would you like to take a few minutes? Yeah? Okay. It's 9:35 or so. Or 10:30, excuse me, 10:35 rather. So maybe around 10:50, is that enough time for a break? About 10:50? Okay. Good. Let's take a break. All right. Hello again. Nice to see you all. I'm going to share a screen. I tried to share it a second ago, but I didn't know how to unmute. Okay, we've been talking a little bit about order and chaos and how it is the job of a deity to bring order to chaos. And I think that sets up nicely a couple of passages from the New Testament that I'd like to talk about with you. One comes from Mark chapter 4, 35 to 41. And I'll pull that open here. Do you know the story, the calming of the sea? I'm sure you've heard this before, maybe, or read it before. Would someone like to read it? Would you like me to read it? I'm happy to read it. Would someone like to do it in Spanish?
Nobody. En español.
Yo puedo leer en español. I can read in Spanish if you want. No les hablaba más a sus discípulos en particular, declaraba todo. Y les dijo aquel día cuando fue tarde, pasemos de la otra parte. Y despachando la multitud, le tomaron como estaba, en el barco. Y había también con él otros barquitos. Y se levantó una grande tempestad de viento y echaba las olas en el barco de tal manera que ya se henchía, y él estaba en la popa, durmiendo sobre un cabezal. Y le despertaron y le dicen, Maestro, ¿no tienes cuidado que perecemos? Y levantándose, increpó al viento y dijo a la mar, Calla, enmudece. Y cesó el viento, y fue hecha grande bonanza. Y a ellos dijo, ¿por qué estáis así? Amedrentados, como no tenéis fe, y temieron con gran temor. Y decían el uno al otro, ¿quién es este? que aún el viento y el mar le obedecen.
Thank you so much, Gabriela. Thank you. Have you heard this story before? Are you familiar with this passage? I love this story, and I think it is beautiful in the gospel, and it reminds us of Genesis, because there the Spirit of God is hovering over the surface of the deep, of the waters, the chaotic waters, and God is able to bring order to the chaos. He's able to make something out of the water. God proves himself the master of the chaotic water. And that is exactly what happens here in the gospel account with Jesus calming the sea. It's not for the disciples in this boat, it's not just a symbolic metaphor, but it's real life for them, that there's this squall, that there's this violent storm that comes open on the water, and they're on the verge of dying. And Jesus is unconcerned. Do you know why? Anybody know why Jesus is sleeping in the boat? Why is he asleep?
I think because he knows everything. He's in peace because he has the control.
I think that's exactly right. So he's not concerned, he's not afraid or scared the way that the disciples are, because he knows that this is not um the end. Death is not imminent the way that the other disciples think that it is. This story is actually written in the pattern of the story of the account of Jonah. If you're familiar with the prophet Jonah in the Old Testament, do you know the story of Jonah and the whale? And Jonah gets swallowed up by the whale, and then the fish spews Jonah out on the dry ground again. That's another variation on this theme of God having mastery over the chaotic water, and even over the great sea serpent dragon that we find living in the water. Um, excuse me, the whale, or the great fish that swallows up Jonah, is an example of the personification of the water as symbol of death and chaos, because that whale swallows up Jonah. And just like Jesus, Jonah in that Old Testament story is asleep on the boat when the sailors are worried, and they decide something has to be done. And Jonah says, "Throw me overboard," but they had to wake him up. And Jesus is just like Jonah. He's fulfilling the pattern of Jonah. He's asleep in the boat here. And I think, just like Gabriela said, Jesus is not worried. He's not concerned. It's a symbol of his power. It's a symbol of his sovereignty over the water. What I love about the story is verse 41. The disciples, after Jesus calms the storm, he asks them, he says, "Why are you terrified? Don't you have faith?" And then they look around, they look at each other, and it says that they were filled with great awe. And they said to one another, "Who then is this whom even the wind and the sea obey?" Because that is a characteristic, it's a trademark of a god, of a deity, that the wind and the water, the storm, the chaotic symbol of death and chaos, obey the deity, right? Do you remember last week we talked about mysterium tremendum, that sense of when you encounter the divine? There's this, Rudolf Otto talks about this overwhelming sense of dread and awe that can fill you up existentially. It makes you afraid when you are in the divine presence. And that's exactly how the disciples feel in verse 41. It says that they were filled with great awe, and probably made the hair on the back of their neck stand up a little bit, and they got goosebumps and chills because the storm was calm. So they're afraid of the storm, but when the storm calms down at the rebuke of Jesus, then they have another kind of fear that overwhelms them. It's an existential, it's something that wells up from inside of them. They realize they're in the presence of a deity, right? Okay. Here is another image from the St. John's Bible. This is called Calming of the Storm. This is another one of those illuminations from the St. John's Bible. Are you able to see this image? Am I sharing my screen sufficiently? How do you like this picture? How do you interpret it? What do you think the artist wants us to see from the picture and understand about the story?
I don't see, from my understanding, it's cows. I don't see any order.
It's a good picture of chaos, isn't it?
I see like confusion, like the waves are together, like it's just all there, and there's a lot of confusion.
Mm-hmm.
It is a disorder. That's it.
Disorder. That's right.
To me, anyways.
Mm-hmm. The title of the illumination is Calming of the Storm.
John, is that a cross that I see there in the picture, or no? Or
Maybe.
it's just me?
Maybe. Where do you see it?
I see it. Move your arrow a little bit up, up, straight, right? Yeah, right there. Is that, what is it?
Maybe. It looks like there's some geometric shape here,
Yes.
and I don't know if is that a cross? Maybe. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
I noticed that there's light in this image, isn't there? So
Mhm.
it's very dark here, but the border of the painting is light, and there's this gold
Mhm.
popping through here and down here. And so to me it makes me wonder if this is representing the precise moment when Jesus begins to calm the storm. Maybe he raises his hand up and the storm is chaotic and swirling, and this is the moment when it's just beginning to transition. Maybe this is the moment when everything is just starting to calm. Here's another one. Maybe you're more familiar with this picture. I don't know. Have you seen this one before? This is by the Dutch artist Rembrandt van Rijn, I think it's pronounced, from 1633. So this is 400 years old, this painting. It's called Storm on the Sea of Galilee, and I think it's depicting the same story that we just read. This 400-year-old painting by Rembrandt. Um, I tried to find the best resolution of the painting I could get my hands on online. Um, I don't know if you're able to make out the detail. What do you notice about this painting? The way Rembrandt shows us the story of the calming of the storm.
I noticed coming out of the darkness into the light, like on the behind the
Over here.
boat, it's so dark, and over here on
Mhm.
the upper left, it's already like you can see the sky.
Over here. It looks like the clouds are starting to go away, and you can see light over here, and there's light here in the waves. Yeah.
I noticed on the bottom on the dark place, on the very down, looks like Jesus is sleeping,
Mm-hmm.
and the disciples is trying to waking him up and
Mm-hmm.
tell him what is happening,
Mm-hmm.
and they're trying to on the top they're trying to control the wind and everything, but they are looks like very scary and afraid. And if you see the panic
Right.
what
You can see that's right. You can see the panic, and these disciples over here are working feverishly to try to control the boat and try to keep it together. Maybe it's breaking up and the sails are flapping around. You can see the cord over here is just whipping around in the wind, and they're working very hard, and Jesus is calm. Yeah. Yeah. Uh, I think this painting is beautiful, and it's one of my favorite paintings ever. I really like this one a lot. Um, let's see. I wanted to show you one other passage that's related, I think kind of related to this. In the book of Revelation, in the book of Revelation, at the very end of the book, chapter 21, the book of Revelation has 22 chapters. So this is almost at the very end of the book of Revelation. And here John says in Revelation 21, I saw a new heaven and a new earth. The former heaven and the former earth had passed away. And then look what it says. The sea was no more. Okay. There's no more sea. Why does John's vision of a new heaven and a new earth not feature the ocean? The sea was no more.
As if there was no more chaos.
That's it. That's right. In this new heavens, in the new earth, death and chaos, disorder, injustice, all of that is put away. All of that is gone. All of that is done with in the new heavens and the new earth. At the end, all of that is gone. And so, um, my wife likes the ocean. She likes to go to the beach. She likes to sit by the side of the water, and I think maybe some of you even reported that you can hear God's voice in the crashing of the waters in the ocean. And it's nice and it's lovely. We're drawn to it. It's part of the fascinans that Rudolf Otto talks about in the divine encounter, the divine experience. We're drawn to the ocean. It's powerful. But here it represents symbolically death and chaos and disorder. And in the new heavens and the new earth, there's no place for that. So I don't know if this is figurative or literal, that there really won't be any sea in the new heavens and the new earth, but that's what it says, and that's the picture that's described here in Revelation chapter 21. And I think that Yesenia, I think that was you who said there's no more death and chaos. That's right. Yeah. Here's another question I want to pose to you, and I'd like to put us into breakout groups one more time because I want to hear what you think about this. We've been talking about water, and we've been talking about death and chaos. We've been talking about uh, the job of a god is to bring order to chaos. That's what deities are supposed to do. They're supposed to bring order to chaos. And I want to pose to you the question, what is the nature of a miracle? Think about what is a miracle? It's a supernatural sort of interruption of natural order. So what is the nature of a miracle? And what do you think order and chaos have to do with it? I'd like to know what you think about that question. So can I put you in breakout groups? Is that all right for a couple of minutes to discuss this question? Okay. Do you understand the questions? Yeah. All right. Well, hello, welcome back, everyone. I'm not sure if everyone is able to get into a breakout session. If you were stranded by yourself, and I think Yesenia was at least, I apologize. Was anyone else stuck on their own besides Yesenia? Were you able to get into another group and have conversation? Yeah. Okay, good. All right. what are some of the things that we had a nice conversation in our group. Cindy, would you mind sharing? Would you be willing to share some of the things that you talked about?
Yes, we talked about like that a miracle is something that the human can't explain why, it turned out the way it was. And we talked about like last year we had our Chewy's brother Ruben had a stroke, and he's always alone. He's never with anybody. But he was driving, and then he stopped to a job with his son, and had a stroke on top of a roof. And it was a miracle that the best hospital for strokes was minutes away. So his son carried him into the truck and took him to the hospital, and were able to get the blood clot out of his brain very quick. So he has no, like, you can't tell he had a stroke. Then that was on Saturday. On Wednesday, he had an open heart surgery because they found out he had a heart tumor. So like looking back, like it was very like the picture chaos to us because we thought he was gonna die. And then after Wednesday, it was like calm, it was a light. And then we looked back, and everything that happened and how it happened was a miracle. There's no other way to explain it. He got there in time where there was other people. He fainted on the roof with his son there. The son took him to the hospital, which was minutes away. And then they found out he had a heart tumor, which if this would the chaos wouldn't have happened, he would have probably died.
So I really liked what you said, Cindy, about the miracle being something, or maybe Chewy, this is what you said, that a miracle is something unexpected or something unnatural. Was that what you said?
Yes, he said that a miracle is something that the human can't explain why, it was resolved, or it happened the way it happened.
The human can't explain why it happened the way it happened. And so there's something, in some sense, there's something that is out of what seems to be the natural order of things when a miracle happens. That's what makes it a miracle, because it steps outside of what would be ordinary in a situation.
Mhm.
Right?
Yes.
But then you also talked about the miracle itself brings order to a disordered situation.
Yes. Yes, it was how you said, like when we found out, it like our lives was like the picture, for those days, because we did not know, what was gonna happen. But when everything was resolved, like it was the calm, or like, Jesus calming the sea and saying, hey, like, don't you have faith? Like, I'm here, just call on me.
Thank you for sharing that. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
What else did you guys discuss otherwise in the other group? Question is, what is the nature of a miracle? And also, what do order and chaos have to do with it?
¿Alguien me lo podría traducir en español, por favor? Las preguntas.
¿Cuál es déjame naturaleza de un milagro? ¿Y qué orden, am, y qué orden y el caos tiene que ver con ella?
Gracias.
De nada.
¿Puedes compartir, José, lo que nos tocó, por favor?
Okay, Belinda and I, we both agree that there's something beyond understanding on the miracles for sure. And they bring calm, just like the story that Cindy just shared. There's cows and they bring calm. The miracle happened there, and it's amazing. But we went to the scriptures a little, and we went to Mark 9:17, when this boy is sick, and he's so sick that I'm not going to read it, but I'm just going to kind of summarize a little. That the father of that boy brought him to the apostles to heal him. Jesus was coming down, and long story short, the father had faith in order for that miracle to happen, but he didn't have enough. So he says, "My faith is not enough. If you will, sort of like help me." And Jesus said, "Why did you ask? If with faith everything is possible." And then he healed the boy. He commanded, that's a miracle. He commanded the spirit, the demons, to get out of that boy and never come back. But when they were in private, him and his disciples, the disciples asked him why they were not able to heal him. And then Jesus says, these demons only with prayer. And then another, not in Mark, another one says with prayer and fasting. So that's what we were talking. She also, Belinda, the miracle that came up to her mind, it's when the woman was sick for 12 years, and her faith was so strong that only by touching his cloth, she was healed.
Luke 8:43, I think it is.
So they bring calm to a disorder.
And so you are highlighting the role of faith in these miracles, and the importance of faith in the human participating with God in bringing order to chaos in these moments.
Correct.
That's very interesting.
Prayer. Sorry.
Go ahead, Belinda. What did you say?
With prayer.
With prayer.
Yes, that's what.
That's right. Wonderful.
And I strongly believed, in my own experience, it's prayer and fasting. When you fast properly in prayer, somehow God gave you a little strength. It's I don't understand it, but you feel it.
You're participating with God in bringing order to chaos in that moment. Through faith, through prayer, through fasting.
Correct.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. And Oscar, I don't know if we just lost Oscar, but he said something important. I was hoping he would say for the rest of us, but maybe we lost him. I'm not sure.
I can share a little bit, John.
Oh, are you there? Okay, good.
Yeah. So maybe I can phrase it in Spanish for the rest of the group. Lo que le compartía al grupo es que otra palabra que podemos usar es intervención. Intervention de parte de Dios sería la definición de un milagro. But at the same time, I had this question. La pregunta es, ¿cómo podemos reconciliar el hecho que Dios interviene para restaurar el curso natural, pero a la misma vez ese curso natural va en contra de la misma naturaleza? Entonces, por ejemplo, la enfermedad, so illness. Pues todos sabemos que conforme pasa el tiempo, vamos avanzando en edad y que la enfermedad es eminente. Entonces, cuando alguien es restaurado a la salud, el milagro está interviniendo en contra de lo que la naturaleza misma está haciendo. O el ejemplo del mar. El mar por naturaleza tiende a ser caótico. Entonces, cuando Dios ordena que se calme, está yendo en contra de la naturaleza del mar para restaurar caos perdón, para restaurar la paz en medio del caos. Pero la parte que estoy struggling es esta dualidad entre restaurar algo que está hecho para ser caos. So I don't know if that makes sense. Si alguien tiene algún comentario o pensamiento.
Oscar, one of the things I remember, and I apologize, I'm not able to really understand Spanish very well. I apologize. But one of the things I remember you saying in our group when you spoke in English, um, and you can correct me if I'm misremembering, Oscar, but I remember you saying something about there is an intervention that is necessary because things are not fully ordered today as they ought to be. Did you say something like that?
Yes.
So things are not fully, I don't have to explain that the world is not the way it should be to anybody. Everybody knows
Right.
everyone knows that's true. And we could even go back to Psalm 82 when it says that the gods are not bringing justice to the world. They're not taking care of the needs of the lowly or the poor. And you could say that that is happening still now. That's still the case that people are poor and oppressed. That the world is still disordered and chaotic. Um, I think that's why John says in Revelation at the end in Revelation chapter 21 that God is making a new heavens and a new earth, one in which disorder has no place. And there's no more sea, to the degree that the sea or the ocean represents chaos or death. Um, in the meantime, humans are participating, and I'm so glad that I think Jose and Belinda were talking about the participation of humans with God in bringing order to chaos through prayer and through fasting, and through works of righteousness. We are partners with God in bringing order into a chaotic world. That's something that I actually want to talk about in the last session a little bit more. The next week we'll get into the bodies of God. I want to talk about ways that God manifests in as a burning bush to Moses, for example, or as three visitors to Abraham, or as an angel to Hagar, or to Mary, and so on. But the last session, I want to talk about the temple and God's presence among his people in the temple or in the tabernacle, and the way that we participate with God in the way that humans participate with God in the tabernacle and in operating the tabernacle and the temple in the Bible in the Old Testament, and maybe how that correlates to what Oscar is talking about a little bit. The world is not yet as it should be, and we are God's partners. We are God's co-laborers in the New Testament. Paul talks about us being the hands and the feet, the body of Christ, because we manifest all of these different parts of God and God's work among his people. Right. So anyway, that's for later on. It's 11:40. We've been talking for a while, and I think it's time for another break. Is that all right with you? And take another 10 minutes? Would you like 15, 10 or 15? How much do you need? 5? 5's okay? 10? Okay. Let's do 11:50. We'll come back at 11:50, okay? All right. All right. Hello, everyone. A couple more things I want to talk about, and then we'll be done for today. Let me see if I can share my screen one more time. Okay, so today we've been talking about order and chaos. We've been talking about nature. And when it comes to God in nature, I think it's important to highlight the role that heaven and earth play in Scripture as witnesses of the divine covenant that God makes with humans. Okay? And looks like some of you are making notes, so I won't click away from this screen yet. You give me a thumbs up when you're ready. Okay, Jose is ready. Thank you. Agnelie's okay. You ready, Cindy? Okay. I can make this PowerPoint available to you all, by the way. You don't have to copy this down if you don't want to. I'm happy to send this as an email attachment or something. Make it available to you if you want it. Would you like to have it? Yeah, okay. Appreciate that. It makes me feel good. You want to see it. Okay. In Deuteronomy, let me see here. In Deuteronomy 4, okay. This is part of the Mosaic covenant from the Old Testament. All right. That term testament means covenant, of course. So the Christian Bible has an Old Testament or an Old Covenant, and it has a New Testament and New Covenant, right? Old Testament, New Testament means covenant. Old Covenant, New Covenant. And the covenant in the Old Testament that we're really talking about is the covenant that God makes with Moses and the people of Israel on Mount Sinai. Okay. And here in Deuteronomy chapter 4, this is some of the introductory material before Deuteronomy starts to describe what these commandments are. But here they're trying to impress, and Moses is trying to impress upon the people the importance of keeping the commandments. Israel must obey the commandments. They must keep the covenant in order to stay in good standing with God. And I think this is a nice segue from what we were just talking about before the break, which is that humans cooperate with God in maintaining order in the cosmos. We are covenantal partners with God in creation. And that's really what covenant means. That's what the covenant is about. And so humans keep God's commandments, and we exercise righteousness in respect to what God asks of us. And in that way, we participate in maintaining order in the cosmos. Okay? We help to keep evil at bay. We help to suppress chaos and destruction and death and evil to the degree that we are faithful to God, to the degree that we keep the covenant. That's sort of the structure, I think, ethically of what's happening in the Hebrew scriptures and in the New Testament too. So in Deuteronomy chapter 4 here, I'll read some of this in English. It says, "Hear, Israel, the statutes and the ordinances I am teaching you to observe, that you may live and take possession of the land that the Lord, the God of your ancestors, is giving you. In your observance of the commands that Yahweh or the Lord your God is commanding you, shall not add or subtract." And he just goes on to say, "Observe these commandments carefully. This is your wisdom." All right. It goes on, verse 9, "Be on your guard. Be very careful not to forget the things your eyes have seen, nor let them slip from your heart as long as you live, but make them known to your children and to your children's children," talking about what God has revealed to his people on Mount Sinai and so on. "Assemble the people for me, that I may let them hear my words. You may teach their children. You came near, stood at the foot of the mountain. The Lord spoke to you from the midst of the fire." So this is something we'll talk about next week a little bit, some of the forms that God takes when God reveals God's self to people. You heard the sounds of the words, but saw no form. There was only a voice. He proclaimed to you his covenant, which he commanded you to keep. The 10 words we know as the 10 Commandments, which he wrote on 2 stone tablets. Okay. He goes on down here. It says, let's see. Be careful not to forget the covenant which the Lord your God has made with you, fashioned for yourselves against his command and idol in any form. For the Lord your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. When you have children and children's children have grown old in the land, should you then act corruptly by fashioning an idol in the form of anything, and by this evil done in his sight provoke the Lord your God? Then Moses says, I call heaven and earth this day to witness against you, that you shall all quickly perish from the land which you are crossing the Jordan to possess. So there's a consequence. The covenant that God makes with Moses and with his people Israel at Sinai is a conditional covenant. If they keep the commandments, then they will get a blessing. But if they don't keep the commandments, then they will get a curse. So life depends on observance of the commandments, on keeping the covenant. And if they don't keep the commandments, if they don't keep the covenant, then all these bad things will happen to them. And that's the story of the Old Testament. We see Israel fall into sin, and we see that they go into exile and they experience some of the curses of not having kept the commandments. Does that make sense? What I wanted you to see, though, here is verse 26 that says, I call heaven and earth this day to witness against you. So all of creation in Deuteronomy 4, verse 26, is functioning as a witness of the covenant that God is making with Moses and in Israel. That's interesting because we think about heaven and earth as maybe inanimate, not having personhood or personality. The sky, the sea, the land doesn't have a personality, isn't able to sign a contract or to testify in court, right? Right? But in Deuteronomy, God calls the heavens, the skies, he calls the earth to function as witnesses, to bear witness, to testify if Israel fails to keep the commandments. Why does God call upon the heavens and the earth? Well, let me just pose that question to you. Why do you think God does that? So you see that here in Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 26. Later on, 30:19. Let me see. Same thing. I call heaven and earth today to witness against you. If you don't keep these commandments, I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Choose life, that you and your descendants may live by loving the Lord your God, obeying his voice, holding fast to him. That will mean life for you, a long life for you to live in the land which the Lord swore. So there again, in Deuteronomy 30:19, heaven and earth are functioning as witnesses of the covenant. You see? And then again in 31:28, same thing. Assemble your tribal elders, your officials before me, that I may speak these words for them to hear, and so may call heaven and earth to witness against them. Here's my question to you all. Why does God call heavens and the earth to function as witnesses about whether Israel is keeping or not keeping the commandments? How does that make sense? Because the earth and the heavens, they don't have personality the way you and I do. So how can they witness whether Israel is keeping the commandments or not? What do you think about that?
I can think of the natural disasters we call upon us by not following the commandments, maybe.
We bring natural disasters upon ourselves by not keeping the commandments. That's definitely a part of the covenant that God makes with Moses and Israel at Sinai, for sure. Natural disasters happen. That's right. Why is that? Why do the why do the heavens and the earth bear witness? Why do you think that is? Thank you, Yesenia. That was a good answer, by the way. Thank you. I Go ahead. Looks like, are you going to say something, Gabriella?
Can you repeat the question,
Well,
please?
maybe it's not a very good question. Maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe it's not a
Oh,
good question. But I'm trying to ask, why does Deuteronomy refer to the heavens and the earth as witnesses of the covenant? Why do you think that is? I think it's strange in the sense that we don't think about the heavens and the earth having personality and being able to testify in a court, for example. You can't ask a question to the heavens or to the earth, the land or the sea or something. So in what sense do they operate as witnesses is my question. This is a hard question. And if you're confused or stumped, then I don't blame you. I think part of it, I think part of the reason is because in the ancient world, deities were assigned natural characteristics of nature. So Zeus, for example, this Greek god he's got a thunderbolt, and he's a god of the Baal in the Canaanite pantheon also is a god of thunder and lightning. Okay. Let's see. Poseidon. Do you know that Greek god Poseidon? What is his natural domain, Poseidon?
The sea.
The sea. Yeah, that's right. The sea. And so all these different deities have various aspects. There are gods of war, there are gods of love, there are gods of wisdom and um, of the sun. All different, every different aspect of the natural world is often attributed to some deity in particular. Um, in Israel's case, there's only one God, and so God is not limited to the natural characteristics of any one particular phenomenon. Does that make sense? And so Israel's God is not a God who concentrates on lightning bolts and thunderstorms. He can do that, but he can do a lot of other things too. Does that make sense? So we don't describe Israel's God, as one who is limited to the sea, like Poseidon is, or something. So because God stands categorically alone, it's not possible to bring other peers, other similar deities as witnesses of a covenant. If God is making an arrangement with his people Israel and he's signing a covenant with Israel, there's no one else who's categorically eligible to witness the covenant. Do you understand? Because no one else is a peer of Israel's deity. He stands alone. All right. And so the heavens and the earth, even though they're not divine in and of themselves, they are comparable to sort of some natural characteristics or features of deities in other known pantheons. I think that's why Israel's God calls heaven and earth to witness the covenant, because we got to have someone who can testify that this is an agreement between God and Israel. this is a concept that we call divine accommodation. God is accommodating God's self in revelation to humans using categories and language that humans understand. So in antiquity, they understood that these natural phenomena are related to deities. And instead of invoking the deities themselves, God invokes the natural phenomena, which are not ascribed to any divine being. I see Yesenia, you're shaking your head. Yes. Does that register? Does that make sense?
It does make sense to me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes.
Thank you. Good. Okay. That's a good way to introduce then a lot of the prophetic witness. If you look at the prophets and a lot of scripture, am I still sharing my screen? Maybe I'm not. I'm not, am I? All right. Okay. So a lot of the prophetic witness talks about God shaking creation. Have you ever read passages like this before in the Bible and the prophets especially? God says, I am shaking creation. I am disrupting the order. I'm bringing chaos to the order of creation. We see that in a number of places. And here I've got just a few pulled up, I think. So here it says, the voice of the Lord shakes the desert. The Lord shakes the desert of Kadesh. And we just read Psalm 82, which says, the gods neither know nor understand. They wander about in darkness, and all the world's foundations shake. Habakkuk says, he stood and he shook the earth. He looked and made the nations tremble. The ancient mountains were shattered. The age-old hills bowed low, and the age-old orbits collapsed. The prophet Haggai says, thus says the Lord of hosts, in just a little while I will shake the heavens and the earth, the sea and the dry land. Isaiah says, for this I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth shall be shaken from its place at the wrath of the Lord of hosts on the day of his burning anger. Why is God upset? Why is there wrath? Why is he shaking creation, the heavens and the earth? Because Israel isn't keeping the covenant. And the heavens and the earth, they bear witness to the infidelity of Israel to God's commandments in the covenant back from Mount Sinai. So in the New Testament, it says, people will die in fright in anticipation of what is coming upon the world, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Hebrews says, his voice shook the earth at that time, but now he has promised, I will once more shake not only earth, but heaven. So there's a recognition, there's a realization that there is disorder in the cosmos. And this is something that Oscar was talking about, I think, a minute ago before the break, that things are not the way they're supposed to be. And the heavens, and one of you said this very insightfully a minute ago too, that that's why the earth is in topsy-turvy turmoil, because we're not keeping the covenant, we're not keeping the commandments, we're not in good relationship with what we're not being good partners, I guess, with God in establishing order in creation. Does that make some sense? Is that, yeah? Okay. Let's see. We are short on time. I want to introduce you to my one of my favorite folks. This guy, his name is John Muir. He lived 1838 to 1914. And this guy was a naturalist. He was out, I think he's from Scotland or something. He's from Europe. Anyway, he comes to North America in the 19th century and is just captivated by creation and nature. And he says, oh, these vast, calm, measureless mountain days, days in whose light Everything seems equally divine, opening 1,000 windows to show us God. So John Muir talks about the capacity that humans have, and this goes back to what we were talking about a week ago. The capacity that humans have to experience the divine, especially in nature. So if we're talking about divine appearances to humans, for John Muir, that happens um, out in nature all the time. And so today, you can go to Yosemite or Kings Canyon, see the Sequoia National Parks. You can walk what's called the John Muir Trail, which is a picture that we have here. There are obviously all kinds of beautiful places on this earth. Here are a couple that I really like that are not that far away from us, are in Indiana. This is a picture of the Manistee River Trail in Michigan. If you're ever close, one of you, Belinda, are you in Portage? I'm trying to remember. That's not too far from Michigan, is that right? It's not too far, right?
No.
Yeah. Anyway, this is the Manistee River Trail. Beautiful. Here, I know we have some people in Kentucky. This is the Red River Gorge in Kentucky. This is one of the natural formations in the Red River Gorge, which is a part of the Daniel Boone National Forest. Today in Kentucky, this is called Chimney Top. I like to hike down there. Sometimes I do that. So anyway, John Muir is pointing us to the reality that God is present, is visible in nature. The last thing I want to share with you, I know we're running out of time here. The last thing I want to share is actual representations of God manifest in nature. And here I want to choose the example of a bird in which God seems to show up in the Bible, manifest as a bird in a number of places, or is at least represented as a bird in a number of places. That might be a good way to put it. So, for example, in Genesis chapter 1, it says the Spirit of God is hovering over the surface of the deep. That word in Hebrew is really more like flutter. God is fluttering, hovering the way a bird hovers or flutters over the surface of the deep. At the baptism of Jesus in the New Testament, the Spirit of God is represented as a dove. You have a number of places in the Psalms and Isaiah when God spreads out his wings, it says. God spreads out his wings and hovers or flies. St. Francis, of course, has a reputation for his connection with nature and particularly with the birds. He famously preaches to the birds. Here's another image of Francis with a bird. The feast day of St. Francis is associated with the blessing of the animals. Here he is preaching to the birds. There's something about a bird, isn't there, that makes you think about God? Birds can do something that humans can't do. What is that?
Fly.
Fly.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they can fly. Birds can fly, and how many of us would love to be able to have that superpower, to be able to lift off of the ground and hover in the sky? Birds have a God's eye view of creation. They can fly up high in the sky and look down and see everything, and it's sort of a divine perspective from the heavens. So the birds are a nice image of God in a way. They show, or that they help us think about the divine. Um, let's see. In the reading, I'll come to this in a second. In the reading, um, did you see the essay that or the article in which It talked about exploring nature and contemplative prayer and being outdoors and thinking about the perspective of other animals. Were you able to were you able to look at that reading when God was a bird? Did you see that PDF attachment? If you haven't looked at that yet, I recommend it. I think that's an interesting read. Um, in the book of Job, in the Bible's book of Job, it says, "Ask the beasts to teach you, and the birds of the air to tell you, or speak to the earth to instruct you, and the fish of the sea to inform you. Which of all these does not know that the hand of God has done this? In his hand is the soul of every living thing, and the life breath of all mortal flesh." So the book of Job is all about wisdom. It's all about understanding meaning of life and the meaning of our pain and disorder and suffering. And in one of the speeches here, there is an appeal to nature. Actually, nature features prominently in the book of Job. Is all over the place in the book of Job. And I've always been fascinated by this line in verse 7: "Ask the beasts to teach you, and the birds of the air to tell you. Speak to the earth to instruct you, the fish of the sea to inform you. Which of all these does not know that the hand of God has done this?" There's something we can learn from being in nature. There's something we can experience of God in creation. And today we live in houses with roofs and walls, and we spend a lot of time to separate ourselves from nature. We work very hard to keep the elements away. And at the same time, there's something about the elements, there's something about nature that tells us something about God. Okay. For next week, I want to talk about bodies of God and ways that God actually shows up in to human beings. So we're going to look at some more theophanies in particular in Scripture and the Old Testament. Let me see. Stop sharing. Okay. That's what I want to do next time. I want to look at bodies of God. So God shows up and talks to Moses in particular. We'll definitely spend some time looking at that one. We'll talk about some angelic appearances. We'll think about the appearance of God to Mary, or the angel of the Lord to Mary. We'll talk about angelic appearances, maybe to Hagar. Some announcements that God makes to his people. I want to look at the commander of the army of the Lord in Joshua, who appears to Joshua right before the fight at Jericho and Ai. So I look forward to getting into that. I think that's super interesting. The way God appears to Moses as a burning bush, but also in his covenant with Abraham, he passes between these animal halves, taking the form of a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch. Maybe we'll talk about the glory of God as a cloud and a pillar of fire moving around with Israel in the story of the Exodus and the wandering in the wilderness. That's what I have on the schedule. Do you guys have any questions or comments or feedback from today, or anything you'd like to do differently, more of or less of?
John, I have a question. Um, this is for our next class, right? Which will be what, March 15th?
Thank you for asking that question. Thank you. That's right. I'm I'm not available today. Next week, actually. Our next meeting will be not until April 15th. April 15th and April 22nd.
Yes, it works fine with me, and thank you for your time. I really appreciate the group sessions because you get to talk to other people about their experiences, and some don't understand English, so they're able to understand it more.
I appreciate that. Okay, I'm gonna try to keep doing that. Maybe we'll do more. Would you like to do more of that next time?
Today was perfect. So
It was okay. All right.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay.
Just FYI, I will be out on April 15th that weekend.
Okay.
I'm going up to Chicago for a spiritual retreat.
Okay.
So I'll be
Okay.
hopefully.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful couple of weeks. Thank you for your attention and participation. It was nice to get to talk with you today and visit with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
All right. Thank you.